I would have gone back and cracked a bottle of champagne and celebrated if they cancelled the movie. But I did feel terrible about injuring the guy. I kept apologizing every day, and eventually they made me an honorary stuntman and gave me a plaque. On May 19th we shot a huge outdoor concert at Magic Mountain, the amusement park where the movie took place. It was a free show and there were kiss banners everywhere. This was to be the climax where we battled the bad guys on stage, knocked them out, and the audience would go crazy. At this point I was ready to shoot myself. I would have rather watched Cal Worthington's used car ads on an endless loop than do this movie. We got to the last song, Black Diamond, during which the drums levitated. We shot take after take, and the drums were going up and down and up and down, and I just flipped out. I took my sticks and threw them into the drums and stormed off in my limo with Rosie. They had to get some middle-aged stagehand to throw on one of my costumes and sit in my seat. They continued filming from different angles, so you couldn't really tell that it wasn't me. By then Ace had also walked and they used a black guy as his double, which seemed to piss him off. By then Lydia had come out to visit. Of course I kept her and Deb apart at all costs. On May 27th we wrapped the shooting, so we had a party back at Hermitage. We were playing a really fun card game called AC/Deucey, and at 5 in the morning, I had just won a pot that was worth $7,000. I don't know if you've ever seen 7 grand in hundreds and 50s and 20s, but it was an impressive sight. When I won that pot, everybody quit for the night. But I was jazzed and stoned. It was my last night in El Dade. The next day Lydia and I were supposed to fly back to New York. I was dreading that because I was so in love with Deb that I couldn't bear the thought of leaving. So I decided to get in my leased 928 Porsche and go for a drive. It was Fritz's birthday that night, so he said he wanted to go with me. We got into the car and we started racing around town, and I wound up driving over to Deb's house. We walked into her house carrying a half-full magnum of Dom Perignon. In my pocket I had a bag of loots and at least an 8-ball of coke. I tried to persuade Deb to come out and keep partying, but she was having none of it. I think you guys should stay here, she said. I know your wife is at the hotel, but you can call her. You're really too smashed to get back into that car. That would be a big mistake. I knew that if I stayed there I would get late, and then I'd never want to go back to the hotel for the flight to New York, so we decided to leave. Plus Fritz was urging me to go because he didn't really like Deb. His allegiance was to Lydia. He was being responsible. So against my libido's judgment, we left. On the way back to the car, Fritz asked me if he could drive. Hey, it was his birthday, so I said, why not? He got behind the wheel and put on his seat belt. Me, I didn't buckle up. We started driving. Deb's place was only about 5 minutes away from the hotel, but we seemed to be driving in circles and it was taking forever to get back. It turned out that we had driven all the way to Marina del Rey. The sun was coming up and Fritz turned onto Sepulveda Boulevard and gunned that car up to 90 miles per hour. I popped an Eagles cassette into the player and Hotel California started to play. The next thing I remember was seeing a white light. But it wasn't just any white light, it was the warmest, deepest, most breathtakingly pure white light I had ever seen in my life. I felt totally comfortable and at peace. And I seemed to be moving toward that light, getting closer and closer, and the thought of that was making me feel better than any drug I had ever taken. Chapter 12. I was almost totally bathed in that white light when I began to hear some noises. They seemed indistinct at first, but then I thought that I heard my name being repeated over and over. And in the background, I could hear horrific screaming and the words, "Oh, God, help me. Help me. I can't take the pain." Finally I opened my eyes and saw more doctors staring into my face. I was really pissed off that they had prevented me from going to heaven. "Shut the fuck up," I yelled at the source of that horrible screaming. "Take it easy, Mr. Chris," one of the doctors said. "You're in a hospital and you're in good hands. But you got a little bent out of shape in that accident." Then they filled me in. Fritz had been doing 90 miles per hour when he hit 2 telephone poles, knocked down a mailbox, and sideswiped 4 cars before ramming into a huge hole that caused the engine to blow up. The explosion threw me through the windshield and 50 feet into the air, at which point I went face first into a curb in a fetal position. When the cops arrived at the scene, they didn't even know I was there. They thought I was just some debris on the side of the road. When they finally found me, my heart had stopped and they had to revive me on the scene. As it was, I had broken all my ribs and all of my fingers when I went through the windshield, as well as busting my nose and sustaining a concussion. I was the lucky one. Fritz had been belted in and he got caught in the inferno. He had burns over 70% of his body, which was why he was in such agony. He was so badly burned that they had to give him morphine through the bottom of his feet. Bill Hoyt was one of the first civilians on the scene and he took pictures of the wreck but would never show them to me. They were too horrific. They wheeled me into a private room and I passed out again. When I came to, the adrenaline had worn off and I was in agony. Lydia moved into a nearby hotel and visited me every day. Unbeknownst to her, Deb drove by the hospital every day and looked up at my room. She was afraid to come in and bump into Lydia, so she sent me a single red rose. I had so many flowers in that room that it looked like a funeral parlor. But they started getting stinky and making me sick, so I threw all of them out. Except for that single red rose, which by then had withered considerably. "Why are you keeping that one rose?" Lydia asked one day. "I don't know," I lied. "There's something about it." After a few weeks in the hospital, Paul came to visit. He walked in indignantly and looked down at me with disgust. "Look at you. You really fucked up," he said. "No shit," I said. "How long are you going to be here?" he asked. "I don't know." "A while," I said. "You have to do your solo album. How could you do this? You're really a fucking idiot," he said. "What compassion. What heart." "Well, I just came to see how you're doing," he said. "You're not going to see me again. Oh, and Gene wanted me to tell you that he thinks you're a loser and a moron and that you deserve everything you got. Good luck on your solo album, but he refuses to set foot in this hospital." "Really?" "Yeah, he wanted me to relay that message," Paul said. "Well, you did, so get the fuck out." Unlike the other two, Ace was by my side from the get-go. He came in the day after I was admitted. "Cat, look at you," he said. "I'm in such pain, brother," I complained. "Fuck this," he said, and stormed out looking for a doctor. Seconds later, he had dragged the doctor into the room. "You give him something for his fucking pain or I will burn this hospital down. Better yet, I'll buy it and fire every motherfucker in here," Ace said. The security guard came into the room because he heard all the commotion, but Ace didn't care. "Bring in more bodyguards. I'll kick their asses, too," he said. One night I was lying in bed in the hospital when this young nurse came in. "Hi, Mr. Chris, how are you feeling?" "I feel like shit," I said. "I need painkillers. I can't sleep." "Well, I'll take care of you. She opened up the door and I got some of that morphine drip. Are you feeling better? Yes, I said dreamily. I can make you feel even better, she said, and she pulled the blanket down and gave me a blowjob. I couldn't believe it. It was like something you'd read in Penthouse Forum, except she wasn't that good looking. Not that I complained. When she finished, she smiled. I just wanted to be able to say that I gave Peter Chris a blowjob. I'm a big fan of your bed. It was a great blowjob. I was coming and I was in pain and I had a kink in my back all at the same time. She went and got a basin, wet a face cloth, and washed my dick, washed my balls, and put the blanket back on me. Good night, Mr. Chris, she said. I never saw her again. Fritz had been transferred to a major burn center by then. Eventually he made a full recovery and stayed in the business. When I got out of the hospital, I was still hurting and I wasn't strong enough to go home. But we had to begin work on the solo albums, so I wound up staying in El Dade. Which was okay by me since that meant I'd see them. I was head over heels in love with them. In retrospect, it was more lust. I was so taken by her beauty, but there was no depth to my feelings. No sense of companionship. I just wanted to fuck her every minute of the day. Was that so wrong? I didn't think so. Lydia had gone back to work on our new house, and the calls became less and less frequent. It wasn't that we had a major falling out. I was never that happy sexually with Lydia. It was impossible for her to measure up sexually to these girls who would do anything to boast that they slept with a rock star. Deb could, though. She was a total party animal who could drink and snort as much as me. Plus she had a voracious sexual appetite. She was bisexual, which was really exciting since I had never had a girlfriend who went both ways. Later I found out that it was an asset in Hick's world. His favorite thing was having 3 chicks at a time. He loved to watch and he liked to use elephant-sized vibrators. Deb once took me to a part of the Playboy mansion where they had 25 vibrators and 2-way dildos hanging on the wall. I liked him. He was a real role model for men who wouldn't want to walk around in a bathrobe and get laid 24/7. So all that hot sex had turned my head around. I convinced myself that I had fallen out of love with Lydia. I felt bad about cheating on her with Deb, but I couldn't help myself. My dick was thinking, not my brain. When I decided that I was going to stay in El Dade to do my album, I went out with Chris Land and rented Vincent Price's 37-room house in Holby Hills, a stone's throw from Hick's mansion. I moved in with my bodyguard, Rosie. A few days later, I had him contact the Playboy mansion and find Deb. He got her on the phone. Peter's going to do this album in El Dade, and he'd love to see you for dinner, Rosie told her. We went out to Jason's and she looked gorgeous. I brought her back to my place and we fucked all night and she moved in. In retrospect, doing the solo albums probably put the final nail in the coffin of the band. From the start, Sean was against it. He thought there would be winners and losers, and that would be the demise of Kiss. Sean's idea was that we should each back the others on their solo albums. But we got sucked into Bill and Neil's grandiose schemes. We would make history by releasing 4 solo albums on the same day. No band had ever done that before, and no band has done it since. When it was time to break away and do the albums, Sean got depressed because he found out that he wasn't going to produce mine. I had gotten together with Stan Penridge and worked on some new songs for the album. Stan and I would often get together and write when we were on breaks from touring. I decided that I wanted Giorgio Moroder to produce me. He had done a lot of work with Casablanca at the time and he would go on to do the music for Scarface. He turned me down because he didn't like the demos that Stan and I had done, so then I tried Tom Dowd, who was Rod Stewart's producer. Tom was in Mexico at the time, and the message he got was that Mr. Christ wanted to talk to him about producing this album. By the time he cleared up the confusion and got back to me, it was too late. So I went back to Sean, but he had already committed to producing Gene's album.